How do we do that? Well, that I would like to show in a small demonstration of ArtPro Plus. So with ArtPro Plus, as already mentioned, with ArtPro Plus, we will work on native PDF files. So it is very important to know that, let's say, for example, I receive a PDF from my customer and I open this PDF in ArtPro Plus. If I would just move, let's take that bio logo, for example, if I would just move that bio logo, move it 2 centimeters to the side and save my file again, then basically I have exactly the same file like before I opened it. Of course, the bio logo will be moved, but I'm not going to completely change the integrity of my file. Also, with ArtPro Plus, we still support, or we have the possibility, let's say, to open, for example, an ArtPro file, to open a PDF PLA file, or to open a normalized PDF file. In this case here, I have received a normalized PDF file, whether it's from my customer or whether it's a previous version that I need to rework. This is a normalized PDF file. I can stay within that normalized PDF file, or I can use a native PDF file format, which also allows to have more functionalities available within ArtPro Plus. So in this case, I want to convert my PDF file towards a native PDF file or a PDF Plus file. And immediately, so a couple of things are happening. We can already see here on the left-hand side that I had a small messages window popping up. So I have here 4 warnings. And with these messages, well, I received some general information on the process of modifying the file from a normalized PDF towards a generic PDF, but also something else. There were processing step separations used in artwork layers. What does it actually mean? Well, processing step separations is a new way of a native PDF, so that's not proprietary to Esko, that's native PDF, is a new way of separating non-printing content from printing content. We will add more information into a PDF file to make sure that, for example, we will treat inks or separations in the correct way. In this case, for example, this has been visualized for the crease separation with the round circle, while the cut separation in this case, it's just as technical as a crease separation, but it does not have the same visualization. Okay, and that is because, well, that also explains why we have received that warning message. Something was off here, so we need to investigate this. Okay. Also important, if you will open a normalized PDF file, for example, if you will open an ArtPro Plus file as well, then quite typically what we will do is we will, if you import a file, I mean in ArtPro or in package, then quite often we will normalize that PDF file. What does that mean? That means that we will take down the complexity of the file to make sure that the file is more workable, that we can perform our prepress actions on that file. With ArtPro Plus, we will not do that automatically anymore. We want to keep a file as is, but of course, sometimes we do need to take down the complexity from a file, especially if it's coming from Illustrator. It might be cumbersome to find back what actually is linked with each other, which groups we have, which unnecessary clipping masks we have, and so on. So I still want to clean up that file, although I don't want to spend time to do so. So therefore, I'm going to make use of cleaning tools in ArtPro Plus to clean up, for example, groups, unnecessary clipping masks, merge similar pattern text, and other possibilities. Okay. So in this case, as you can see, we have cleaned up 253 items, and I also have cleaned up a couple of pots and text boxes. Okay. So that is taking down the complexity of a file. What else do I want to do before actually starting prepressing my file, before spending a lot of time on modifying the file and then seeing in the middle of my editing that a customer has forgotten to add a couple of things, and then I had to contact the customer, for example. No, I want to avoid that, and I want to pre-flight my file up front. What is pre-flighting a file? Well, for this we will use the nFocus pit stop engine, and we will build a pre-flight profile. So a pre-flight profile, that is a profile with technical checks that are important for us. Okay, so we will build a profile, and we will verify our file against that pre-flight profile. Okay. In my case here, I have used a very simple pre-flight profile. I only had added a couple of checks just because of the demo. But a pre-flight profile can contain up to over 200 checks. So it can check quite a lot of things in my file. Okay. I could generate a report and save it on my desktop, for example, and send that to my customer. Or I can actually immediately use the feedback here on the left-hand side in the messages panel, where in this case, for example, I have two images, the two background images with let's say quite a low resolution. Although I'm not really going to bother about this because these background images are patterns. It's background pattern, and it's 150 dpi, so it's not that bad. So I will leave them as is. But what does bother me a bit more is the following item where white line art does not knock out. Let's auto zoom to that selection. And indeed, I can see that this white recycling man is not white, it's in overprint. So that is not okay. So I want to take away the overprint and I want to put this white man in knockout. Okay. The next issue is the line weight that is too thin. So again, I select the violation and immediately that violation gets selected. And indeed, I can see that I only have 0.50 millimeters while we specified to have at least 0.2 millimeters in this object. Okay, so I have resolved that issue as well. And I can now, for example, check my file again just to make sure that I have not forgotten any things or that I have wrongly adopted elements. I still have that error with these images. I will leave that as is. I will not really bother about it because, as I mentioned, that's a pattern, so you don't really care. First thing that I want to do now is I want to address the issue that I had while converting my normalized PDF towards a generic PDF, towards a native PDF. So what actually happened? Well, if I click on this, then he will also, or ArtPro Plus will also zoom towards these elements. And I can see here that I have an issue on the bio logo on the left-hand side because that gets selected. On some vectorized text on the right-hand side, some live text, and some vector object. Okay. So instead of changing the separations or the colors for these objects, I will not change the objects, but I will actually change the usage of that color. I will change that color patch and update that for these objects. Okay, so I can select these objects. I can see that it's used in both stroke and a fill color. So instead of changing that a couple of times, I will just take away the cut for both these fills and these strokes, and I will clean up, for example, my magenta and my yellow separation. Okay, so in this way, I have addressed the issue with now that separation. And I can also see now that the cut separation has now been recognized as being a special processing step separation. Okay, so that message has also been resolved and we have improved that usage. Okay, now if I check my separations, then for example, with my bio rouge, I can see that separation, I'm not even sure which color it is. It looks a bit pink, let's say. I can see that it's used in the watermelon and the pomegranate image here. Further, I can also check the Pantone 198C separation, which looks okay to me. And then I have the Pantone 4057C, where I can see that that separation is only used in these vectors for the watermelon, the bio, and so on. Okay, so these two separations, well, I actually want to merge these two separations together. So I'm just going to slide them over each other, and they'll be merged immediately together in one separation. Okay, so next up, my customer asked me to make a text modification because, well, in the text that now gets selected, the customer added here that he wanted that, yeah, we had 4 separation or 4 consummations, sorry, and I need to modify this with 6 consummations. Okay. Problem here is that if I look to the outline, to the outlines of this text, I mean, then I can see that this text is not a live text, but this is contourized text. Okay, so changing this text can be quite cumbersome. Therefore, I will make use of the utility we have in ArtPro Plus to read this contourized text, let's say, and to convert these contourized texts towards live text. It's just assist the system with a language and some rotation information, and we now have live text again. Okay. Also here, we will receive a list with best matching fonts. So I have, for example, Gotham Narrow Bold, which has a 98% hit. While, for example, if I go down the list towards, for example, this Menlo Bold separation, then that's a bad choice. Let's just change that with a more better choice to compare now the text with the initial values we had in our customer received file. So I will use the compare functionality and just compare, for example, my customer file and the modified text. Okay, so I can see that I have some changes in the text in this case. So let us stick with the best presented match from ArtPro Plus, which was the Gotham Narrow Bold separation. So I'll select it. And if I now verify the two together, then I don't really see a change anymore. So this is great. So now let's just change 4 to 6 consummations for these two lines. Again, if I'll compare them, then I can now see that indeed it's only 4 and 6 changing with each other. So I'm happy with this result, and I will accept this text modification. Okay. Next up is my barcode. For example, well, I'm going to print this label on my FlexoPress. So for example, if I create barcodes, then I want to make them as good grading as possible. So for example, I want to make sure that I have a correct barcode, and I want to adapt a bit to my printing process, where, for example, because of printing, the bars are slightly a bit thicker, so I want to compensate for that. However, the problem I have here is that the barcode is just vector information. This is not barcode information. I don't have any metadata, let's say, that declares that this is a barcode with a certain value and so on. So therefore, I'm going to use ArtPro Plus to automatically convert this vector barcode towards a dynamic barcode, let's say. And now, because this is a dynamic barcode, I can see here in the list on the top that I had that it was an Eon 13 barcode with a certain value and so on. So if I compare these two together, then I can see that this is fairly good. Just see that the light margin indicator is not converted. So I will add that light margin indicator, and I will also introduce 3 micron bar width reduction. Okay. So if I now compare the two together, this seems to be better. So let's accept this modification. And just for the sake of working precise, I want to align the barcode with the background object or the placeholder object. So I'm going to align the crosshair and quickly align that barcode towards the crosshair. Okay. So I now have modified the barcodes. I have added some bar width reduction. So I actually have improved this file. Next up, since this will be printed on a transparent substrate, I do need to add some white underprint. The white underprint needs to be created on the complete background. Okay. And we need to relieve or release at least the logo from the white underprint, because there we don't want to have a white underprint. So I'm just simply going to create a white underprint underneath the complete background. With a small choke of 0.2 millimeters, and I will now take out the Yola logo from the white underprint. So I select that. I also take the white underprint tool. Again, I will just stay away 0.2 millimeters from the object, and I will now subtract that white Yola logo from the white underprint. If I now take a closer look, and let's select to make it a bit more visible, then you can indeed see that the white underprint has been drawn away 0.2 millimeters from the background. Also interesting or important is that white underprint layer has also received now a processing step layer tag. So whenever we will automate this file or whenever we will use that file further up in the process, that will also be recognized as being a special type layer. Also, the separation obviously is a special type separation. Okay. I just unhide the white underprint layer so that I can easily work on the rest of my file. And well, first of all, I want to verify the modifications I've done so far. So I will use some of the quality control tools we have in ArtPro Plus. And the first quality control tool I will use is the breakouts. So with the breakouts, I want to visualize all the values that are lower than my first printable dot. In this case, I have set my first printable dot on 1.6%. And if I measure, for example, the densities in my file, then I can see that I have quite a lot of objects, or that my black is in quite a lot of places indeed lower than that 1.6%. Okay, so this is situated in the background image in my case. So what I will do in this case, I will just modify my background image, and I will basically take out my black separation. So I got lucky here that the modifications were not that huge. So if I now check again my black separation, then that looks better already. If I check my breakouts, then indeed I can see that my background has been greatly improved. Visually, it's still okay, but I still identify an error or an issue with that watermelon. Okay, the thing is, that watermelon is an image, and we're not going to modify images in ArtPro Plus. Why inventing the wheel if there are already great tools out there? So we're going to modify this image in Photoshop in my case. We did create a good link, let's say, in between ArtPro Plus and your preferred image editor. Again, in my case, that's Photoshop. So there's no need to extract an image, for example, to then open it in Photoshop to make your modifications, to relink it, and so on. Now we have that direct link in between the image and ArtPro Plus, so you can easily open it in Photoshop and then save it again. As I'm not a real hero in Photoshop, I will cheat a little bit, and I will use the flexo-clean functionalities we have. So in this pack for Photoshop, to cut off the highlights below 2% in my case, to remove some scattered dots, and to also fill small holes in the image. Okay. I will not spend too much time on it. With a bit more effort, I can even improve what I have done here. But I just wanted to improve the majority of the image. And I can immediately see as well that my image has been modified and it has been automatically updated. And what is cool as well is that I can undo that image modification or redo that again. Okay, so it's in the history of my file. Checking the breakouts, then I can see that there are less red dots here, so I have really improved that image. Okay. Next, I want to compare my file with my incoming customer file. So I take my prepress file and I want to compare that with the incoming customer file. And if I check the file, then I can see that I only have 3 visual differences, that ArtPro Plus only has found 3 visual differences. The thing is, well, that visual difference is over the complete background, because I have changed my background image, I have changed my watermelon image, so there's not that much anymore that is still the same like what I had before. Another thing is I did not have open opaque white separation in my customer document, and obviously I have created an opaque white in my file here, so that is also something that I want to exclude from the comparison, for example. Okay, so yeah, since I have made a lot of modifications, I will really see that when I will highlight the different pixels. Before doing that, I just want to compare the customer file with my prepress file, so I check that with C. And indeed, I can see that the little man and the barcode, for example, have changed. I would also see that the 4 has changed to 6 consumption, so it's really visual to what I have changed in my file. Thing here is, if I want to highlight my different pixels, then my file will be bright red, which is great because I honestly changed basically everything in my file, so that is also highlighted completely in the file. I could maybe also unhide or don't compare the black, for example, to have the edge of being able to compare my text changes and some other small changes in the file. In this case, I'm just going to continue with my prepress work. Okay, so I'm basically quite happy with the modifications I have done so far. So next thing up will be the creation of traps. Okay, so for that I will open the aesthetic trapper in ArtPro Plus. The thing is, with the aesthetic trapper, our aim is to trap the first time right. What do we mean with that? We want to avoid that you have to make lots of modifications and exceptions in the file. Obviously, it's still possible that you want to have an exception for whatever reason. I will show you how that works. But the main goal is to be able to trap the first time right. That being said, we learned from our customers that 80% of their files are actually trapped already the first time right, and that no more modifications are required. Okay, so to create traps, we can create normal traps, and we can then create the reverse traps. And then obviously, yeah, we can add the trapping distance, change settings like truncate settings. How are we going to apologies. Are we going to trap images, for example? Do we want to create pullback traps? Do we want to close gaps that are smaller than a certain value, for example? So it's just create a trap layer. And there we go. If I now zoom in on a certain part of my file, for example here on these leaves, then I might be not so happy with the trapping distance because I find the traps slightly too visible. Although it's very good, to be honest, in these leaves. But let's assume that I still want to make an exception on the traps for these leaves. So I'll just simply add a trap tag, and I can then just update my trap. Okay, so I'll just use Command T to update the trap layer, and immediately the trap layer has been updated. Okay. What is the advantage of adding exceptions to objects and not changing traps? Well, let's say that, for example, for this leaf, it's quite straightforward to make a modification for this leaf, for example. But let's say that my customer has asked us to add a modification to this file, to add, for example, a ribbon to explain that's a ribbon with 20% free. Okay. I'm not going to create it now. I will just copy it from something I have prepared. But if I now paste that here in a new layer, so let's make a new layer and let's move it below the graphics layer. If I now paste that 20% free ribbon, for example, and if I now zoom in onto that same area, then I'm not so happy with the trap result. Obviously, these were my old traps. So I should have, or in other cases, I should remove my traps and recreate the traps again, just to make sure that I have now correct traps. All with ArtPro Plus, especially since I have added a trapping exception to that object, to these leaves. I can just update my traps again, and that will create a nice trap on the updated situation. Okay. So my file basically is ready, but before I want to stop, or before I'm completely ready with the file, I just need to make sure that I will change my PDF boxes. Also here, I will use the automatic, my trap layer has received a processing step layer of automatic trapping. So also further in the process, if you need to reconsider or update traps, for example, even with Automation Engine, that information is available and can be reused as well. So my trap is up to date. Okay. So I am ready with modifying my file. The only thing that is left for me is updating the page boxes. I can do that in a manual way. Okay, so I can go to page boxes and update the page boxes, or I can use a PDF action list to perform that. What actually is a PDF action list? Well, a PDF action list is a set of actions that we put one after another that will be processed automatically. You can use, for example, a PDF action list to simply add CMYK separations, or to reorder your separations in a more logical order. You can use these PDF action lists to, for example, create processing steps to identify certain separations and to put them on the correct processing step layer, for example, to create a cutter, to create a minimum dot, and so on and so on. It can also be used, let's say, for example, that you need to modify 10 flavors of the same file. And for every flavor, you need to perform the same 15 actions, for example. Okay. Or you can do them all manually, or you can do it once, save it in a PDF action list, and then reuse that PDF action list 15 times for these 15 flavors. Okay. In my case, I will use it in a more simple way, and I just want to adjust the page boxes in my design. Okay, so I'll just select that PDF action list. I will run it onto the design, and immediately I have updated my page boxes. Okay, so with that, that concludes actually my one-up PDF editing. I'm actually ready with that file. Now I need to make my step and repeat. I can make a step and repeat from multiple files, or I can make it from I will now use that one single file that we just have modified. So I created a new document, and on that new document I will now place my repetition file, my prepress file. Okay. I will place that, and I will convert this towards a grid. Okay. So now that my file is a grid, I can now add parameters for step and repeat. So I need to rotate this, for example, on 270 degrees. This will be, for example, a 3 by 2 step and repeat. And I need a horizontal gap of 1 millimeter and a vertical gap of 2 millimeters in this case. Okay. Bleed has been clipped on 0 millimeters, so I'm not really happy with that result. So I will now change my bleed, for example, to clip at 2 millimeter, and I can see that my bleed has been nicely clipped on 2 millimeters of my die line. How do we consider this? Well, we have here the die shape that is taken from, again, the processing step layer. So we reuse that information to consider the die line and to make sure that we create a nice step and repeat. Okay. Next up, for the step and repeat, I want to add a small stagger. Maybe not the most logical one in this step and repeat, but I just want to visualize this stagger functionality. And I will update my page boxes. I have done that before in an automatic way. I will now do it in a manual way. So fit my trim box and then just align my media box around the trim box to now visualize my file in my complete canvas. Okay, so this is my step and repeat with bleed, with stagger, with virtual and horizontal gap. So what is left now is to add dynamic marks. So I will load that dynamic mark set. I have created here one for staggered step and repeat. So use the staggered mark set and load them onto my document. The advantage here is, well, as already mentioned before, we have much more functionalities than compared to ArtPro, for example. We have, let's say, similar functionalities towards smart marks in Package and Plato, but a big advantage here is that we're much more flexible compared to Package and Plato. Also have a more visible list on the marks for this file. Only thing left, because now I have the stagger on my file, so I would actually need to cut my plates just to be able to mount them on my cylinder. So I can do that in a manual way, or I can also use the plate cut functionality to automatically create plate cutting paths. Here we have the possibility to add some parameters to indicate, for example, the radius that we allow for these plate cutting paths, because of course we want to avoid tearing a plate whenever we remove it from our cylinder. And we can make the decision to use the same path for all the separations, or we can let ArtPro Plus decide on the most optimum cut path for the flexo plates. Okay, so I will just let ArtPro Plus decide here for the most optimal cut path, and I will create my plate cut paths. So when ArtPro Plus performs this operation in the background, I also have now the tool to verify these plate cuts. And I want to verify here separation by separation. So for example, my cyan plate cut paths is similar to my magenta and my yellow plate cut paths, while for my black in this case, ArtPro Plus has made a different decision because we could just make straight plates. So this is more optimal in this case to make the plate cut paths. Further also, the Pantone 198 also has straight cuts, but in a different location, let's say. And then my Pantone 4057C also has a different plate cut path. Okay. So in a couple of minutes, I have actually created my step and repeat, added marks, and created the plate cut path.